Thank you for that very kind introduction. I don't usually participate in places where I have to be introduced that way, so at some point I was like, well, I don't know if that's me, especially the huge amount of money in grants. Let me talk a little bit about that. I was involved in a grant here at ETSU. There were several of us, and it was on bringing diversity to ETSU. So I don't even remember how much money that was. So when you mentioned all those thousands of, I don't remember that, but yeah. And as you were talking about my area of specialization, notice she didn't really mention African literature. My area of specialization is social linguistics and ESL, teaching English as a second language. That is my focus. But I had this wonderful privilege of being asked to teach African literature. And whenever that time comes, the semester when I have to teach African literature, I feel so privileged because for me, that's an opportunity to take a trip to Kenya or to some place in Africa for a semester and then come back. And I usually tell my students, I don't know what it will take them, but I'm going to force them to come with me on that trip. While I could talk about my area of specialization, linguistics, sociolinguistics, teaching a second language, when Dr. Thompson asked me to give a talk here, the first thing that came to mind was talking about African literature, which I'm teaching this semester. And the idea of Women on Wednesday forced the topic. Kenyan women writers and their dialogue on issues that affect them and that affect other African women. Now, I'm looking at this, and you can see I carried my entire library here with me. I'm not going to be reading through all these books, but I just want to show you that they are available, and if you ever want to read any one of them, I have them on my shelf. Come see me, room 213, Burleson Hall, and borrow, as long as you promise to return them. So when we think of literature, and I'm sure you've been in, a number of you are my colleagues, but for the students, I'm sure you've taken some literature class somewhere. When we think of literature, we think of an area of study that expresses truth in its own very unique way. And sometimes if you are not in literature, you might not understand why we are reading all these books, but I don't know if there is any more powerful way of expressing truth other than in literature. And literature is not abstract. At least the one we do in my department is not abstract. It deals with human experience. It deals with issues that we interact with every day. And it gives us an awareness of reality in such a powerful way. So when I read these works of literature, they're fiction, but when I read fiction, I'm not just seeing abstract concepts. I'm seeing human experience. I'm seeing reality. And the authors then, to me, are communicating their experiences and the experiences of the people around them. You recognize that if you are studying literature, wherever it comes from, the images that are used, the characters that the authors choose are all based on what the author has experienced. So literature brings to us the experiences of the author and the experiences of the author's loved ones and the people around them. And so when I look at the Kenyan authors, they're going to bring experiences of their families, of their relatives, and their own experiences as well. In most books, I don't know what books you've loved as you've read different texts. Most books that we end up liking, the books that we think highly about, are not necessarily those that just excite us and the excitement is gone. It's those books that point us to human conditions, and they touch on those conditions in such a way that we are left thinking about those conditions for a very long time. Those are the books we remember. And some of the books that I read touch me in such a way that I can't forget them. So there are some texts I've used in my classes over and over again, and sometimes I think I'm going to replace it, but feel I'll be doing my students such a disservice if they can't read this book. And every time they're in my class, I hope that they get that experience. Now, a book set so far away from you, how will it touch your experience? Again, one thing I know is that for our work to be a classic work, if it's work that is going to touch me, it should be work that should also transcend culture. It should be work that if it's set in Kenya, you can still read it and experience what the people there experienced. You can also read it and identify with the characters. Last year, when I taught my African Lit class, one of our last texts we read was a short play, and we picked the different students in class to read different characters. By the end of the semester, we had known each other so well that we could tell who can play what character. And when we left the class, we knew that is so and so. And the main character here is a Coco, and at the end of my class, I look around and I can see quite a few Akokos in class. If I don't see them, that author has not been very successful, because their experiences should be shared by every human being, because it's a human experience. And so looking at Kenyan women authors, who are they? There are several Kenyan women authors, and I couldn't list all of them. But I'm just going to discuss a few that have impacted me. And I may not even go through this little list we have here. Actually, I'm going to focus on the first three. All these women authors deal with various issues, a lot of human issues. And what are these issues that they handle? Come on in, Pedro. What are some of these issues that they deal with? And are the issues that Kenyan women face different from the issues that American women face, for example? Yes and no. Some issues are context specific, while other issues are shared across the globe. So I've tried to think of some of the issues, and especially the ones that I've come across in the texts we read, and they are broad. Some of these issues, for example, deal with political engagement. Those are issues that you've all handled. It could be the politics of the university or the politics of the county where you live, but they are issues that we can all that we've all experienced. But there are issues that are more of Kenyan issues. For example, I look at an issue like polygamy. How many of you really have to worry about the question of polygamy? I hope not. We have issues such as HIV and AIDS. Now, I know that is not restricted to Kenya or to Africa. There are issues here, but the magnitude of the problem is not necessarily the same as what we have in this country. So some of these issues, some authors actually bring out almost as many of these issues in their texts. Others address just a few, and I'm just going to look at how they approach a few of these issues here. The first one that I want to look at is Grace Ogoti. And Grace Ogoti is one of our oldest authors. She was born in 1930s. Notice I don't say 1931 or 32. In a number of rural families, it's not that easy to tell when someone was born because parents were illiterate and didn't keep records. But somehow they can tell it was in the 30s because something happened around that time, something historical that marks the year, and so it around the 30s. She died very recently, just as I was planning this talk. Yeah, she's one of the earliest Kenyan women authors. We do have male authors who've written for a very long time, but she's one of the earliest Kenyan authors. Grace Ogoti was a nurse, she was a journalist, and what she's known best for, she was a politician. She was a member of parliament for a while when there were very few women in such positions. So when she writes, she's writing about experiences that are unique to her, but experiences that are also common to many women. She's written several books that I really love. One, The Land Without Thunder. If it's short stories, if you ever have some time and you want to read that, please borrow it. And most of these books are in the library too. I think my first year here I requested a few of these, so they are in the library. She's written The Promised Land. She's written The Strange Bride. I didn't bring that one, it's in my office. And she has this other collection, The Other Woman. Now the titles are pretty interesting and they tell a lot. They are revealing in themselves. So in addressing the issue of women, let me begin with what Grace does. In the novel, The Promised Land, and I don't intend to tell you everything in the books, because if you're like me, I don't like reading books that have just been given an entire synopsis. I like reading and knowing the ending. So in the book, The Promised Land, Grace Ogoti doesn't necessarily give us a woman as a protagonist, but she tells the story of the women in this story, in the book. So instead of giving us a woman as a protagonist, she shows a regular family, African family or Kenyan family, where the wife is a good wife if she obeys everything, if she's submissive to her husband. And so that is the ideal woman, submissive so much that she doesn't have her own voice, but she comes across in a very ironic way. So if this is the kind of submissiveness that it takes for a woman to be ideal, I don't think that's what I want. So the book is not, the first reading doesn't necessarily show Grace as promoting women issues, but she does that in a very subtle way. So she brings up this female character who is very, very submissive, and at the end you can tell she's saying this is not what things should be like. So that submissiveness that is almost oppressive. In her other work, The Other Woman, this is a collection of short stories, but The Other Woman short story itself is very interesting, and Ogoti takes almost a similar approach with The Other Woman, but it's really, really sarcastic here. The Other Woman is a modern woman. This is a modern, the protagonist is a modern woman, and she's a beautiful woman. She works, she has a good job, but she has a lot of concerns. The husband is very upset that she is a working woman. So dealing with the issues of women and work and family. So she's highly educated. She has a sophisticated look that is actually in the text. She worked as an executive secretary at the International Aid to Africa office in Nairobi. Her husband, a brilliant engineer, was the general manager of aviation, but he was well thought of, and everybody agreed that he had deserved his promotion. A rather quiet man, he guarded his attractive wife jealously. And it was partly his reason that he was against his wife taking up a paid job. So Ogoti brings up issues of not just traditional women who have to be submissive, but brings up issues of present-day women, modern women who are working. This one is an educated woman. She has a good job. She's attractive, but her husband is very, very protective. He doesn't want her to work because he's jealous. And then we see things going wrong in that home because he insists that she should not continue working. And finally, you know, they have children, they have house help, and all the girls that come to work with them don't stay for more than 6 months. They come in, they work for a little while, they become pregnant and have to leave. And gradually the woman comes to realize that it's the man who is responsible for all these pregnancies, kind of almost punishing her for choosing to work when she should stay home and take care of her children. But in a very powerful way, Grace Ogoti brings up all these concerns of women. What do they do? She has an education, she has a job, she can afford to hire someone to take care of her children, but what is it that she should do? And is her work an excuse for the marital unfaithfulness? That is one question that Ogoti leaves her readers to ponder. And a question like that is one that only a woman is able to raise, because it's only a woman like Ogoti who can understand what is going through the main character, Jedida, what her struggles are, whether she should stop working and stay home, and what she can do to keep her family. Ogoti does that in several of her other works too. For example, in The Land Without Thunder, another collection of short stories, in one of the stories which we've done in our class, The Green Leaves, set in a very traditional village, the men of the village chase some two thieves, cattle thieves at night, and they kill them. But before they kill one of them, but before the thief dies, they cover the thief with leaves and run away, because their culture says you shouldn't watch someone spirit living. They shouldn't watch them dying. And so they think they've killed the thief and go back to their village, but one of the men comes back and uncovers the thief to steal the money that the thief had stolen, only to find that the thief was just unconscious. The thief wakes up and kills this man. So it's a twist of events. And so in the morning, when they wake up and they're going to look at the thief they killed, they realize they've killed one of their own. But it's a mystery they cannot explain, because they don't understand that this man went back to uncover the thief and he was killed in the process. Now, that story could end there, but it's told by a woman. It's told by Grace Ogoti. And Grace Ogoti doesn't end it there, just goes ahead and talks about, now that this man is dead, what are the experiences of his wife? It's a polygamous home. So then she goes on to tell us the story from the point of view of the wives. Yes, he's been killed, and that was horrible that he had to be that greedy to go back. But what is the experience of the two wives that he has left behind? And in that story, Ogoti ends the story with the wives mourning their husband. It's a sad cry from the women. And one of the women tears her clothes and she mourns. She says, "My lover, the son of Ochieng, the son of Omolo, the rains are coming down. Yes, the rains are coming down. The nights will be dark. The nights will be cold and long. Oh, the son-in-law of my mother, I have no heart to forgive. I have no heart to pardon. And these mourners cheat me now. They cheat me, but when the sun goes to its home and darkness falls, they desert me. In the cold hours of the night, each woman clings to her man, but there is not going to be one for me." That is a story that only a woman can tell, because she's the only one who understands, okay, now we are mourning this man, we are talking about how evil he was, but what is going to happen to the women that have been left behind? And that is a perspective that we don't see unless someone is telling it from a point of view like this one of Grace Ogoti. Quickly through another Kenyan author. And our next Kenyan author here, I'll be happy to show you the picture of Marjorie Oluthe is a Kenyan author. And to go back to who she is, Marjorie was born Marjorie King, in 1928 in England. She came to Kenya to work as a bookseller for the Church Mission Society. And after a short time, she fell in love with Dr. Oluthe, and they got married in 1960. And when Kenya gained independence in 1963, she chose to become a Kenyan citizen. And she had become one anyway through marriage. So she is a Kenyan author. And sometimes we have questions on who is a Kenyan author? Who is an African author? Is it someone born in Kenya? Is it someone who is interested in Kenyan issues? But she is a Kenyan author and a very prolific Kenyan writer. And she's written several texts. She's written books like Homing In, Coming to Bath, and several other works. But and several other short stories as well. But I want to focus on what she does as a Kenyan author in the book Coming to Bath. So in this book, again, very available in my office if you ever want to read it, in this work, Oluthe writes about her protagonist. Her main character is a very young woman who lives a really remote rural village to go join her husband. She's recently married. She's a teenager. She's recently been married off to this man who works in Nairobi. And so she leaves her little village and goes to Nairobi to join her husband, but she's extremely naive. She's never been out of her village. She's young. She doesn't know a whole lot about life. And when she gets to Nairobi, she doesn't know anything about city life, and it's confusing, it's overwhelming to her. And the husband, whom she's going to be entirely dependent on to show her around, to buy her food, and to do everything, is too busy with work and really, really controlling. And so she finds herself in a situation where she's just pushed into a corner. She doesn't know what to do in her naivety. But she gets a lot of help from other women. The first day, she leaves her little apartment and tries to and goes to a clinic because she's pregnant. She thinks she can find her way back because she usually finds her way around in the rural village, but she can't find her way back in the city. Everything looks the same. The buildings look the same. She hadn't even remembered to find out the name of her estate where she lives, so she's lost. And it takes her 2 days to find her way home. And when she does, her husband beats her for being such a nuisance and getting lost in the city. So the first few days are so difficult for her, but she matures very, very fast. And the maturity comes from the help she gets from her neighbors, the women around her. And Oluthe just, in a very powerful way, gives this woman strength. She shows that she can rise above the situations that pull her back, that she doesn't have to, that life can go on without complete dependence on Mark, her husband. And gradually, the marriage actually breaks, and she goes back to the rural area, finds a school, starts taking some classes, and we see her growing. We see her naivety quickly disappearing, and her work, the growth of Paulina, the main character, happens alongside the growth of Kenya as a nation. And as Paulina grows, the Kenyan nation is also growing. But by the time you finish reading the book, you see a woman who has experienced a transition, who has grown, who has become independent, and who can do things for herself, who is not too afraid of not having children, because for a while she tries to have children. They die at birth, or she has miscarriages, but she grows to learn that that is not what defines her as a woman. She relates with other women around her who are not married, but they are very fine in their lives, something she had not thought could be possible in a rural village. But now she's interacting with Amina, for example, who is a single woman raising a child of a house help, and so therefore being a mother without necessarily being a biological mother. So she learns a lot of things. She learns that biological motherhood doesn't necessarily have to define her, that there are several other things that can define her as a woman. And by the end of the book, she's a very, very strong character. She takes care of street children, and if she takes them in, she feels just as much of a mother. So Oluthe really gives these women a new picture of what it can take to be a woman in Kenya and how they can define themselves. There's one more work that, there are lots of the works that she has done, but here's one more that I wanted to bring up. I don't have a copy of that here, but in her work, Chira is taken from a Luo, one of the ethnic languages, Luo word, and it means the wasting disease, which is the name that the ethnic group has given the disease HIV/AIDS, because it wasn't understood. People didn't know what this was. All they knew is that it's that disease that makes people become really, really thin and then they die. It just wastes you away. So the wasting disease. And there were a lot of superstitions associated with Chira, with that disease. And very few people understood that it's sexually transmitted, or it can be transmitted through blood transfusion. People didn't understand this, so they assumed, someone has been bewitched. And if there were all those misconceptions, people were not going to do anything to curb or to fight this disease. So in the book Chira, Oluthe defines the disease. She makes it clear to the people what it is, how people contact the disease. And she does this through two women. One woman is struggling with the disease. She's almost dying. The other woman has caught the disease, but because of what people think about this disease, she's so afraid to reveal to anybody. And that was a key problem in Kenya, especially in the early 90s, even towards the late 90s. People had AIDS, but they were too afraid to reveal. And so, a spouse knew that they had the disease, but they still continued in their marital relations and transmitted this to their wives or to their husbands because they didn't want to reveal. They didn't even want to reveal this to a doctor so that they could be given any kind of treatment. Those who had HIV/AIDS were, outcasts in the society, but especially for the women, the poor village women who didn't know what was going on. So Oluthe tells this story through these two women, and especially the one who has learned to admit, I got this disease, this is what happened to me, this is what I did, these were the interactions I had. And that was one way to get the society to start thinking about what could be done to fight the disease. In fact, I remember before I came to the US, a number of these people who had learned to reveal what the situation was were going from school to school, talking to high school students and telling them, this is not a disease that you get by walking out there and just breathing in whatever air is out there. This is a disease you get, especially through sexual transmission. And that is how I got it. And it was very powerful for the high school students especially to see someone who was ailing. A number of them were ailing because, they still really no medication yet. And it was very powerful as this women went around and talked about their situation, and people became a little bit more cautious. It's not over, but it's bringing about a big change. So the novel just brings in a lot of other issues. It's not just about that physical illness. It's about moral illnesses. It's about ethical illnesses as well. It's the social illnesses. It's the question of how corruption can affect a community. It's about how unfaithfulness can affect a community. And so through the stories of these women, several other women come out, they can tell about their experiences. Not just experiences with AIDS, but this is opening talk to discuss other issues, to discuss experiences of what is going on at home, the abuses they are experiencing, because several women experience abuse, but they think maybe that is what it should be in a marriage, and they never talk about it. But the book Chira is a way of voicing the concerns of women. And I'm not going to say finally, but because there are several of those women, but I'll talk about Margaret Ogola. I have a special attachment to this woman. I've actually never met her personally, but the first time I read her book, I thought she was just my sister. So I love her. Ogola was born in 1958. She died in 2011. She was a pediatrician. She was an administrator. She worked in one of the national hospitals in Nairobi, but she got this calling to go and work with orphaned children who had AIDS in a very, very small rural village. And that is where she did most of our work. She commuted between there and Nairobi. And she was also a director of Life Counseling Center, which especially counseled on AIDS. And her work, she wrote several books, but The River and the Source and its sequel, I Swear, by Apollo, she has also done The Place of Destiny, and she was planning to do a few more, but life went by too fast. Now, the book, The River and the Source, you really have to read it yourself to know what is going on in here. But this book is about a girl child, a Coco. I'm almost tempted to ask Pedro, he's in my class, to give you a summary of the story, but I don't want to put him on the spot. It's a book about a girl child, and what Ogola does is she decides that she's going to give her protagonist, a Coco, such power in the text. I mean, she doesn't care doing that, because every woman has power to do things. Every woman has power to move things along. So, like I say, Okay. So she gives us this female protagonist, a Coco. If you want to remember that, that's the main character. The child gets the name a Coco because she's born screaming. She was a screamer right from day one. And a Coco is a name from one of the ethnic groups that means the loud one. So she gets that name as the loud one, and she is loud throughout her life, because somehow I think she learns that she has to be loud, she has to be heard, and she has to get what belongs to her. By around the time she starts talking, she's already, the first few words she knows is mine. This is mine, not mama or papa. She's saying, this is mine. And throughout life, she learns to fight for what is hers. So a Coco is born to a chief. And the chief is kind of expecting another son because he has so many of them. And when the child is born, he says, hey, another rock for my sling. But he realized, no, it's not a rock, it's a girl. And he quickly changes when he's told, no, it's a daughter, it's not a boy. And he says, well, yeah, it's a daughter, but what is a home without daughters? So he quickly changes that, and so we are left with that question of really, what is a home like that does not have daughters? That is what the rest of the book is like. So this daughter is married off, and there's and the tradition requires that they pay dowry. Do you have to worry about dowry in this culture? Okay, so she receives, the family receives 30 heads of cattle for a Coco, and a Coco is married off. She has the first child, a boy. She has a second child, a girl, and kind of slows down there. But in that culture, 2 children are way too few. And the mother-in-law is so upset and thinks that Akoko's husband should marry another wife very soon because that home doesn't really have children. But Akoko says, you know, she's not barred her husband from marrying another wife because that is what they do in the culture. The only reason that he hasn't married another wife is that she knows how to keep him, how to please him by her words and by her work. That's all she says. The mother-in-law says, you must have used some magic or something to make him not want to marry another wife. But she says, no, it's because of my words. I've learned to use my words well. I've learned to use my hands. I do my work well, and that is why he's not interested in marrying another wife. Akoko has 2 children for a while, and then gradually she has a third son. But it's a family that is faced with one misfortune after another. The husband dies. The first child dies in World War I. And I mention that because, again, like Oluthe, Ogola matches the life of this woman with the historical development of the nation. So it begins in pre-colonial days to colonial period to independence as the woman grows herself. And so she privileges these women. They have their struggles, but she goes ahead and shows that these women can reinsert themselves in the historical development of the nation. Things are not going to be easy for them, but they can emancipate themselves. It's not going to take a man or someone else. They have to be the ones to do this. And they do this in several ways. They tell, Ogola tells their story in a very beautiful way, but does not exclude the men. So some of my students, I asked them to talk about what they think of Ogola and feminist issues. A number of my students don't really understand if she's a feminist because she doesn't just concentrate on the women and their strengths. They are good men in this book, really good men, and they are really evil men in this book. There are also good women in this book, but there are weak women in this book as well. So she balances it out. She shows that in our community, there are both the good men and the bad men. And the bad men in the society should not make us think that all men are bad. And the few women who can fight their way through does not mean that all women can do that, but she wishes that they could all imitate these strong women. So we have Coco, a very strong woman. We have her daughter, Nyabera, who is not very strong, who is faced with a lot of problems. And if it were not for the mother, she could have given up, but she doesn't give up. She has strong support of the mother. And then we see this women, even Nyabera, who is not very strong, when she gets this support from the mother, she becomes strong. She's able to venture into new areas. She ventures into Christianity. It's moving on from pre-colonial period before Christianity to a period of missionaries. And Nyabera, the daughter of Coco, becomes one of the first Christians. She's struggling so much in her home, she decides she needs something new. So she moves into the mission school, and at her age, a mother of one, she starts to take classes. And she's one of the best students in the mission school, and she succeeds somehow. And then through her one child gets to love education too, because the mother has loved education. And so the rest of the book moves on to show the river spreading. So we have Coco being the source of that river, and it spreads from one generation to another. Some points it looks weak, like it might die, but it doesn't, and it continues to spread. And by the time she writes the sequel, the river has spread from that little village in Kenya to North America. One of the grandchildren of Coco is married in Canada. And that is how far it goes. But there is strength in these women that we see here. And how do these women survive the issues that they fight with? Most of the characters we see here in both, I would use Coming to Birth and The River and the Source, both authors somehow want to show us that the agencies, the strength, the women's strengths come from particularly two sources. One, Christianity. Now, I pause here for a while because usually when you see a portrayal of Christianity, it tends to show us that women should be subjective, they should be submissive to their husbands, and therefore we can't really see how that is going to liberate the women. But the way these authors approach Christianity is very different. It's that mission school that gives Nyabera a way out. She goes to school, she learns, and she educates her own children. So Christianity brings education, and education brings liberation for these women. Another way that Christianity works in this, for women, not from women. The other way that Christianity works here in these books is, in this one, Paulina, the main character, interacts with another character who is a Christian. She's not married. Paulina doesn't have an idea of how a woman, she's coming from a village where a girl is born, raised to a given age, and married off. She doesn't know anything else other than that. But there is a Christian neighbor who is single and who is doing very well, who supports a lot of women in her community. And Paulina learns from her that, well, apparently this religion liberates women, and the religion, unlike my tradition, seems to show them that it's okay to be single, that you can live your own life and live it comfortably. You don't have to depend on Martin like she has on a husband, because the neighbor is single and doing a lot of charity work around and very happy in her life. And that is how Paulina herself is liberated, through that kind of Christianity. The other liberation that comes is through friendship. And it's what I have there is wanawake kwa wanawake, that is literally translated women to women. A number of these women authors show that liberation comes from women having friendships, especially with other women, that they get such strong support, and that is how they survive. In both cases, Paulina makes it because there are these women around her who support her at a time when she could not really make it. Coco gets gives a lot of support to her daughter, and without Coco around her, I don't think Nyabera would have survived. So they emphasize, hey women, you have to take each other's hand and support yourselves. That is how you can make it through this. And finally, I think the nation is recognizing the role of these women, and they've not just the women protagonists in the books, but the women authors. And like I said, Ogola died in 2011. Another author that I didn't get to mention, Nobel Prize winner Mathai Wangai, I didn't talk about her. She died in 2011 too of cancer. And the nation recognized these two women because we are all realizing what their contribution can be to the nation. I don't know if I can get this to... Do we have volume here somehow?
Historia yetu. The Patrick Nobel laureate Wangai Maathai and author Dr. Margaret Ogola, who both succumbed to cancer late last month, got special recognition.
I urge all of us to honor the memories of these fallen Machujas by playing our respective roles in nation building.
Where's my mouse? Okay, we can stop there. Oh, you want to stop it? Yeah. Do you see the mouse?
More recently, making the marathon.
Okay.
Do you want to embed it into the PowerPoint?
It was already. Okay. Sorry about that. So the nation recognizes the work that these women are doing, and Grace Ogoti, who died just the other week, was also recognized for the work that she has done. That was what they mentioned, Mashujaa. The Kenyan nation recently, not too long ago actually, started a public holiday to honor its heroes. And that was the celebration in 2011, 2 months after Ogola and Wangari had died. And it's so good to see that a nation is recognizing their work and what they are doing, especially for the women. And so they are numbered among the heroes because of their artistic work. Ogola, who died, like I said, 2 weeks ago, I hope this one works, was also recognized. And oh,
A fortune is missing from a regional bank.
that's not part of it. Okay.
A storyteller, a politician, nurse, mother, and friend. Grace Ogoti will be remembered as a woman who fought this problem with everything her voice, her speech, and her writing. Born in Odhiambo in the Nyanza province in the 1930s, Ogoti attended Mia Girls and Butere Girls schools. She trained as a nurse in Uganda, worked in London, and then Maseba Hospital. She also worked as a journalist with the BBC.
It's actually embedded in the PowerPoint.
She was married to Professor Bentley Ogo.
But since 59 we have been married, and I don't think I would have had a better partner.
She also successfully tried hard in writing and was well known for her cartoons, novels, The Poet's Wonder, which was published in 1966. In 1968, her collection of short stories titled Language of Standard was published.
We thank you for him whom we love so much and who has come to rescue you in heaven.
Loving, caring, and a God-fearing woman, some of the words used to describe her, the word virtue carries the day.
Extremely honest. This was particularly demonstrated when she was in politics. It's still very difficult for African women to be in politics. Too many cookery in politics. And that's when I realized how honest she was confronted by all kinds of criticism.
It's okay, it's about to finish.
And she dealt with it honestly. Sometimes she paid for business.
Ogo was hypertensive and suffered a stroke 3 weeks ago. She was hospitalized at Motherhood Hospital for 2 weeks and discharged a week ago before falling ill today morning. She died on arrival at the hospital.
Already this house is that I can see you, but I don't see anybody. That's what I'm going to miss. There's going to be a lot of people roaming around. But, they want to meet myself. That's what I'm going to do.
All right.
Ogo leaves behind 4 children.
Yeah. So these are the women, and the nation has recognized what they are doing, and they've. Something I didn't mention, some of these books are used as required readings in Kenya. And as the students read, it's such motivation, especially for the girls, to know that they can be what these women have been, and that they can pave their way. They can find a place in the history of the nation and contribute to the development. I'll stop here. Any questions?
Thank you. I don't know if it's so much a question, but I found your talk really interesting, and in particular particularly when I was reflecting on some of the modern and contemporary American female playwrights, it's interesting how many of them actually are staging works not about American women so much, or not, but rather African women. I'm thinking of Susan Laurie Parks' Venus, where she goes back to South Africa, looks at the Venus hot. I'm thinking about Lynn Nottage, whose more recent play, Ruined, is about women in the Congo. And so it's fascinating how, when you were talking initially about how, these concerns, we read to connect to these women and to share the concerns, but we also have these other concerns that we as in the Western world maybe don't share, but there's still this sort of learning through that, right? And I see Western writers, particularly American playwrights, looking towards other spaces to stage the stories of these women. And I don't know exactly why, or if you know of any of these works, but it's an interesting sort of global exchange.
Well, yeah, I don't know most of those because literature is, linguistics, but I wouldn't know about a number of those authors. But one thing I do know is that it's really going to take a woman to write about these stories. For example, when you find stories from Congo, if they are told by a woman, then she might be able to talk about rape.
Ruined does.
Yes, they are the ones that are able to talk about that. The male authors, they write. We have Achebe. Achebe is a great author, but you rarely find him talking about or giving women a place in his writing. For example, the one book that pretty much everyone reads, Things Fall Apart, women play a very little role in there. You can hardly hear them. And I love Achebe's works, but he doesn't talk for the women. And he says in one of his interviews, he says that he got most of his stories from his elder sister. She told him a lot of the stories, but then you would think that somehow in the process of his writing, he would make the sister a protagonist or, something close to that, but he doesn't. He deals with global issues. He deals with, if he's talking about war or with one group against another, it's the men are fighting, right? But we don't see what the women are doing in those books. But when we get a woman writing, she does talk about global issues as well, but she looks at those issues from the family level. And that is one thing that we forget sometimes, that the global issues we deal with begin at the family level. And if you exclude that, you are excluding a very important part of our human experience.
You raise an interesting question, because when I read Adichie's work, her novels for the first time, like Purple Hibiscus, when I read research on it, it all looked back and said, oh, well, she's the new Chinua Achebe, and she's like, her inheritance comes from him. And I listen to you talk about all of these women's voices, and I hear some of the motifs that are also in Adichie's work, about the growth of the girl and the growth of nation state, and the way that friendship and family and women's spaces become a space for growth and development and health. It sounds like these are her foremothers, not that Achebe is her forefather. I mean, she seems more connected to these Kenyan writers than she is to Achebe. I know that's not the kind of the purpose of your talk today, but I wonder if you have thoughts on that.
I think it's what connects women wherever they are, because she writes about the same issues. Some of them are similar issues like those that Achebe addresses. She writes about the Biafra War, but when she looks at that war, she looks at it from a very different perspective. And we can all be at the same place, but the pictures we take are really different. So while she's within the same setting as Achebe, she's looking at things from I don't want to call it from a mother's perspective. She's so young and pretty, but she looks at things from a girl's point of view. And maybe growing up as a young girl in Nigeria, there are things that she saw that Achebe, growing up as a young man, did not see. You know, for example, if she talks about experiences of this house help they had who was so poor and they went to visit them, usually it's the mother who is in charge of the work around the home, so she will be the one who is connected with the people that are helping at home. But there's a whole story to tell about what is going on at home. She tells her a story of the rich man going back to the village, but nobody tells us about what the experiences of the rich man's wife are. And she does, her story is really similar to Nervous Conditions. I don't know if anybody has read that by Tsitsi Ndangareba, and the story is very similar, where you have this rich man whom the village applauds when he comes because he can bring a lot of goodies for the village. But who is doing the cooking? Nobody tells unless a woman tells that story, we won't know the struggles of this woman worried about, will this food be enough? Will it last us the entire week when we are out visiting with these villagers? What will they think if I don't cook well? Those stories, nobody tells them unless they are told from a woman's perspective. And it's still the same. It's still the same context. It's still within the same historical period, but a very different perspective.
Well, I'm sorry. Yes, I kind of have a contribution and a question too. I love your presentation. I'm from Africa, Nigeria in particular, so I know the work to talk about Chinua Achebe. And still, you just said like, behind Chinua Achebe's writing, his elder self had an influence in it, but he didn't kind of picture her in his own writing. So I'll say behind every good man, every successful man, there has to be a woman attached to it, so that kind of shadow it up, but it cannot just be covered. The other thing I wanted to ask is that these women are being looked at by this younger generation. They look on them like these women did something through their writing. So what was the inspiration for the women? Because I'm not sure they really had the role models to look at them. So how come they were able to do a writing that can call for national honors and Nobel Prize? Like, because there was no role model, but I just want to get the inspiration coming from, because those pre-colonial days already had this for women. So I just wonder what happened.
Wow, that's a wonderful question, because some of these are the fasts in their writings. But these authors are educated authors. Ogola was a pediatrician, so she's been to school, she's read other works outside her community. They were not necessarily African writings, but she's read other works because literature was required. But other than that, I think it's powerful that they don't have role models, but they end up coming with works like this ones. And then when they write, they show in their own works, they bring up characters, protagonists who do not have role models, but who can go ahead and pave way for themselves. So I think their works, just like their characters, show that, well, even without a role model, you can still pave way and you can make it. I love your question too. Yes.
After reading The River and the Source, I kind of felt like it was a book about almost promoting procreation in a sense, because it gives you purpose, having a kid. And then you compared it to the other book where it was her, realizing that having a kid is not, necessarily going to make your life important. And I was wondering, do they pair up those books? Because, in places like Africa, unless you pair up those books, the message can be distort, like, or, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I get your question. And what I'm saying here in this book, what they are saying is motherhood can be redefined. If you are not able to have your own children, you can still be a mother. So the core value here is that motherhood in both these books is really valued. Right. But what kind of motherhood? If you can't be a biological mother, you can still be a mother. Yeah. So raising the same concerns, because the women here, if they don't have children, they feel as if they are not, as if they don't belong, because motherhood defines them. So what this one does is going a step higher and saying, yes, we understand that, but you know, if you are taking care of your sister's child, you are a mother that way. So it goes round and extends the definition of motherhood.
I guess my question is more or less, is that book being read at the age of maybe like 13, 14, 15 over there? Because the message can be sort of skewed if you're not mature enough to understand what really is going on.
Usually,
in the River and the Source is what I'm talking about.
This one is
like, you know, the wrong message can come through, that, you know, in order to have a purpose, you have to, you know, it's almost good just to have a child, so then that way you will always have a purpose and you won't, you know.
But you also remember Vera in this book chooses a single life, and she doesn't have children, and she's the one of the main characters too. So yeah, this book is read in high school kids between 13 and 17 years, but because of the breadth of the characters, unless someone really chooses to misinterpret this, especially to the kids, it gives us several characters. Some of the kids might aspire to be like Vera. Remember the smart girl who dates a boy for a few years and decides, this is not the life I want. I think I can be on my own and I'll be very happy. There's that message. But there's also the brothers who choose to have one chooses to go into priesthood and doesn't have a family, and he's so happy as well. Then you have the other characters that choose to have family, and one has 7 children. So the river spreads very different directions, but whichever direction it spreads, whether it's having children, whether it's becoming a Catholic priest and not having a family, whichever way it goes, the author shows us that you can do any of this. And it's the same Ogola who we watched a little clip in class, and she says you can attain perfection at whatever level, being a farmer, being a doctor, being an engineer, being whatever level you find yourself at, you can choose to perfect that. So whether you're a mother or you're single or whatever, she brings all those characters in here and refuses to show us that the only ones that succeed in the community, the only ones that are happy are those that have children. She refuses to do that in here. Good question.
Michieka, I want to thank you for coming and taking us on this journey to Kenya with you to hear these stories and voices that only these women can tell.
Thank you
very much.